code blue alarm wasn't a sound in the distance. It was a vibration in her own chest, cutting through the fog of a double shift. Nurse Amara Jones was at the nurse's station, her third cup of cold coffee untouched, when the room for the VIP patient, the young, reclusive Korean tech CEO, erupted. His heart had stopped. For 47 seconds, she was the only thing between him and death, her hands performing a compressions he would never remember. He lived. But what happened when he woke up would change both their lives forever. His name was Min-jun Kim, a billionaire innovator who built an empire from silence, now lying silent in a bed. Her name was Amara Jones, a nurse running on caffeine and conviction who refused to let a stranger die on her watch. They lived in separate worlds, defined by different rules of power and struggle. He was the patient in the private suite. She was the staff who wasn't supposed to stay. But when his eyes finally opened, and he saw her there, exhausted in the chair beside him, a single, silent question hung in the sterile air between them. What happens next? To understand the collision, you have to start with the silence Min-jun Kim was running from. 24 hours before the code blue, he stood at the head of a boardroom table at Nexa Core Technologies. The air was chilled, charged with a tension no amount of money could smooth over. On one screen, stock prices bled red. On another, a leaked memo detailed a hostile takeover bid from the Vorst Group, a European conglomerate known for dismantling companies like his for parts. Min-jun had built Nexa Core from a dorm room project into a leader in biocompatible neural interfaces, technology that could help stroke victims speak again. But to the Vorst Group, it was just another asset to be stripped. His own board was split. Some saw a lucrative exit, others a betrayal of the company's founding mission. Min-jun's argument was simple, precise, and delivered in the near whisper that commanded rooms. We do not sell cures to become someone else's cost-saving measure. The stress, however, had a physical ledger. His chief of staff, Kang Jae-hyun, had logged his average sleep over the past month, 3.2 hours per night. His personal physician had warned him twice about dangerously elevated blood pressure. He ignored both. The empire of silence was built on the currency of relentless motion. Across the city, Amara Jones's silence was of a different kind. The quiet of exhaustion that comes after a 13-hour shift. The quiet of calculating if the overtime would cover her sister's tuition payment due next week. She lived in a small apartment that smelled of lavender disinfectant and instant noodles, a 45-minute bus ride from the stainless steel aura of the University Med Center. Her world was built on a different kind of ledger: patient ratios, medication schedules, the delicate balance of empathy and endurance. Nursing wasn't just her job, it was the lifeline she'd grabbed when her own family's health had collapsed years before, teaching her that care was often the only true currency in a crisis. She was assigned to the cardiac wing that week, a unit perpetually understaffed, where nurses often skipped breaks just to keep up. The VIP suite on the 8th floor was a rumor to them, a place with its own dedicated staff, where the usual chaos didn't penetrate until it did. The collision course was set by a single, overlooked detail. Min-jun's usual private clinic was undergoing emergency sanitation. His team, in a scramble, secured the VIP suite at University Med Center. Protocol dictated a private nurse from an agency. But that night, a system-wide IT outage meant agency credentials couldn't be verified. The floor was short-staffed. Amara, staying late to finish charting, was the only experienced cardiac nurse available when the call came down from administration. "Jones, we need you to cover 802, just until the agency nurse gets through the check-in. It should be an hour." It was a breach in the invisible wall between the hospital's two worlds. She rode the elevator up, the tired fluorescent light humming a different tune than the warm, silent glow of the 8th floor corridor. For the first 3 hours, her presence was a ghost in the room. Min-jun was asleep, sedated after a minor but painful procedure to address a persistent arrhythmia, a physical manifestation of the boardroom war. She monitored his vitals, adjusted his IV, her movements efficient and quiet. She noted the security detail outside the door, the sleek laptop Kang Jae-hyun had left on the side table, the aura of insulated importance. It was just another patient, albeit a more complicated one. Then, at 2:17 in the morning, the first alarm chirped softly from the cardiac monitor. Not a crisis, a warning, a blip in the rhythm. She was at his bedside in an instant, her fingers on his wrist, her eyes locked on the screen. His blood pressure was climbing rapidly. He was dreaming, and it was a violent dream. What she didn't know was what he was dreaming about, not markets or takeovers. He was back in his grandparents' small home in Busan, the air thick with sea salt and silence. His grandfather, a fisherman who had lost his voice to a stroke, was looking at him, hand trembling, trying to point at a photograph. A young Min-jun was trying to understand, but the words wouldn't come for either of them. The frustration was a tangible, choking thing. That specific, helpless silence was the root of everything, the reason for Nexa core, the engine of his relentless drive. And in the dream, it was a wall he was slamming against. His heart raced in response. Amara saw the numbers spike. She spoke to him low and calm. "Mr. Kim, you're safe. You're in the hospital. You need to calm your breathing." In his sleep, he heard a voice cutting through the fog, a calm, authoritative voice in the chaos. His heart rate stuttered, then dipped, then spiked again, a dangerous seesaw. She called for a stat EKG. The machine was wheeled in. As the technician attached the leads, Min-jun's eyes flew open. He didn't see the room. He saw the boardroom, the hostile faces of the Vorst Group lawyers. He tried to sit up, to speak, to command the room as he always had. A bolt of pain lanced through his chest. His hand clutched at the front of his gown. And then the flatline tone, the most democratic sound in the world, erased all status, all wealth, all silence. The next 47 seconds were a lifetime of instinct. Amara didn't see a CEO. She saw a man in cardiac arrest. She called the code, initiated compressions, her body becoming a metronome of life. The crash team flooded in, but she was the first, the constant. The adrenaline was a clean fire, burning away her own fatigue. She followed the protocol, but beneath the protocol was a raw, human refusal. "Not on my watch, not tonight." When the rhythm finally flickered back on the monitor, a weak but steady beat, the room exhaled. The senior doctor took over. Amara stepped back, her scrubs damp, her hands trembling slightly now that the action had stopped. Orders were given to transfer him to the ICU for monitoring. As they prepared the bed for transport, Kang Jae-hyun arrived, her face pale. She looked from Min-jun to Amara. You were the one doing the compressions." Amara just nodded, gathering her discarded equipment. In the controlled chaos of the transfer, a decision was made. The ICU was full. The VIP suite was the most secure, best-equipped room for continuous monitoring. He would stay there, but with a critical difference. Now he required one-to-one nursing. The agency nurse had never arrived. The shift supervisor looked at Amara's file, at her cardiac certification, at the report that credited her rapid response with preventing brain damage. "Jones," the supervisor said, "you're with him. 12 hours, do not leave his side. His people are anxious." It wasn't a request. It was an order born of crisis logistics. So Amara stayed. She anchored herself in the chair beside his bed, a sentry against the silent, fragile beat now echoing on the monitor. She watched the sun rise, painting the skyline in hues of orange and gray. She fought the heavy pull of exhaustion, her own long day now stretching into an impossible marathon. Sometime in the early morning, her body gave in. Her head tilted, resting on her hand propped against the bed rail. She fell into a shallow, vigilant sleep, still in her light blue scrubs, her stethoscope a cold weight on her neck. Min-jun Kim surfaced from the depths of a medically induced calm. The first sensation was not pain, but a profound, heavy stillness. The silence was different now, empty, not frantic. He blinked, his vision swimming into focus on the acoustic tiles of the ceiling. Then he turned his head, and he saw her, a woman asleep in the chair, her expression softened by sleep but lined with fatigue. The faint scent of lavender disinfectant. The steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor that was, he slowly understood, tracking his heart. His memory was a shattered pane of glass, flashes of the boardroom, a crushing pain, a vague, swirling dream of a calm voice in a storm. His eyes traced the line of her scrubs, the identification badge hanging crookedly. Jones, ARN. The pieces did not fit. Where was his team? Where was the private nurse? Who was this stranger who looked as though she'd fought a battle to sit in this chair? His voice, when he found it, was a dry crackle in the quiet room. "Who are you?" Amara's eyes snapped open. For a second, disorientation held her, then professional instinct locked in. She was on her feet, her hand automatically reaching for his wrist to check his pulse, her eyes darting to the monitor. "Mr. Kim, you're awake, don't try to move, you're in the hospital, you had a cardiac event." Her voice was husky with sleep but steady. He didn't look at the monitors. He kept his eyes on her. "You were here," he stated, not asked, "all night." "It's my shift," she said, a simple professional barrier. But Minjun was a man who built empires by seeing patterns others missed. He saw the deep weariness in her eyes that matched his own. He saw the way she had positioned her chair, not by the door, not across the room, but right here, within arm's reach of the bed. He saw the empty coffee cup on the floor, the textbook on cardiac pharmacology peeking from her bag. This wasn't just a shift. This was a vigil. And the calm voice from his dream, it had her accent. "The code blue," he said slowly, piecing it together. "That was you called it." Amara paused, her hand still on his wrist, feeling the steady thrum of his pulse. She gave a single, slight nod. "I was the first responder." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the beep of the monitor. The social contract of CEO and staff nurse dissolved in the stark, raw truth of the moment. She had literally held his heart in her hands. He had been utterly powerless. She had been completely powerful. And now they were here in this quiet room as two very tired people. He finally spoke, his voice quieter. "You saved my life." Amara met his gaze. The professional mask slipped, just for a second, revealing the sheer human weight of the night. "It's my job," she said, but the words sounded different this time, less like a shield and more like a shared, fragile truth. And in that moment, Kang Jae-hyun opened the door to the suite, a phone in her hand, her face a mask of urgent business. "Minjun SSI, thank God. The board has called an emergency meeting for 10 a.m. Vorst has just increased their offer by 20%. We have to—" She stopped dead, finally registering the scene, her boss awake and alert, and the nurse standing intimately close, her hand on his wrist. Her eyes narrowed, calculating this new variable. The outside world, with all its noise and demand, had just crashed back into the silent, sacred space of the recovery room. And the question was no longer just about what happened next between a patient and a nurse. It was about what happened when the person you saved owes you everything, and his entire world is waiting to pull him back into a war. Kang Jae-hyun's sentence hung in the air, a business ultimatum that now seemed absurdly out of place. Minjun didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Amara, who had smoothly removed her hand from his wrist and taken a professional step back, her face resetting into a neutral mask. "The board can wait," Minjun said, his voice still weak but leaving no room for debate. "Leave us." Minjun SSI, with all respect, the offer window. "I said leave." The quiet command brooked no argument. Kang's lips pressed into a thin line. She gave Amara one more scrutinizing look, then retreated, closing the door with a soft, definitive click. The outside world was sealed out again, but the dynamic inside had irrevocably shifted. He was no longer just a patient. He was a man who had just chosen a moment of human connection over a multi-million-dollar corporate battle. "You should listen to her," Amara said, busying herself with checking his IV line, avoiding his gaze. "You've been through a major trauma. Business stress is the last thing you need." "What I need," he said, "is to understand what happened from the beginning, and you are the only witness." It wasn't a request. It was an invitation wrapped in a command, so she told him. In clipped clinical terms, she outlined the events, the alarm, the rising vitals, the cardiac arrest, the compressions. She presented it like a case report, stripping it of any emotion. He listened, his dark eyes missing nothing. When she finished, he was silent for a full minute. "You said I was dreaming," he finally said. "Before the arrest, what did I say?" Amara paused. "You didn't speak, not in words. You were distressed. Your body was reacting. Your heart rate was 140. It was a physiological storm. But you spoke to me. It wasn't a question." He remembered the voice, the anchor. "It's standard practice to try and calm a patient experiencing intense parasomnia." "What did you say?" She met his eyes then, a flicker of defiance in her own. "I told you were safe, that you were in the hospital to breathe." She shrugged one shoulder. "It usually doesn't work." "It did," he said softly. "For a moment, I heard you." Another silence, thicker this time. The shared intimacy of that memory, her voice penetrating his nightmare, lay between them. He broke it by shifting the subject, his mind already connecting dots. "Why are you still here? The crisis is over. There must be other nurses." Amara let out a short, tired breath that was almost a laugh. Hospital logistics. The ICU is full. You need one-to-one care. I was already here and I'm certified, so here I am. She didn't mention the order, the lack of choice. He heard it anyway. You're tired, he observed. It's been a long shift. How long? That's not relevant to your care, Mr. Kim. Min Jun, he corrected. If you've literally had your hands on my heart, you can use my name, and it is relevant. Fatigue leads to errors. I should know. I run a company where an error can cost lives of a different kind. How long, Nurse Jones? The directness was disarming. 18 hours, she admitted, with a break that didn't happen. He didn't apologize, he processed, and you stayed even after the code team left. My assignment was to stay at your bedside. I follow my assignments. Even when you're asleep in the chair, there was no accusation in the question, only curiosity. A faint blush tinged her cheeks. Vigilance takes different forms. The monitors were on. I would have heard any change. He nodded, accepting this. Then he asked the question that had been forming since he woke. What do you know about Nexacore? The shift was so abrupt it took her a second. She blinked. Your company, I've seen the name, tech, medical tech, right? Biocompatible neural interfaces, he supplied. We design devices that help the brain communicate after trauma, stroke, ALS, the kind of conditions that trap people in silence. He was watching her closely, gauging her reaction. For the first time, she saw a spark of something in him that wasn't pain or exhaustion, it was passion. That sounds important, she said, carefully neutral. It is, or it was. The board and our new friends at Vorst seem to think it's just intellectual property to be mined and sold off. They see a product, I see a voice. He stopped, as if realizing he was saying too much to a stranger, but she wasn't a stranger anymore. She was the person who had fought for that voice's right to keep beating. The stress, as you put it, of that disagreement, it appears my body decided to cast the deciding vote. Before she could formulate a response, the door opened again. This time, it was a senior doctor, Dr. Evans, followed by a flustered-looking hospital administrator, Mr. Lowell. Dr. Evans went straight to the chart, then to Min Jun. Mr. Kim, good to see you awake. We need to discuss a care plan and transfer you to a more appropriate. I'm not moving, Min Jun said calmly. Dr. Evans blinked. The cardiac ICU is where you need to be. This suite, while comfortable, isn't set up for the level of. Then set it up, Min Jun interrupted, his voice still quiet but layered with a steel that hadn't been there moments before. I am not leaving this room, and I want Nurse Jones to remain as my primary nurse. A shockwave went through the room. Amara's eyes widened. Mr. Lowell, the administrator, stepped forward, a practiced smile on his face. Mr. Kim, we of course want to accommodate you, but Nurse Jones is a floor nurse. We have excellent specialized cardiac nurses. She is specialized. She just performed under the highest possible pressure and saved my life. Her competency is not in question. My preference is. He turned his head slowly to look at Mr. Lowell. Is there a problem with my preference? It wasn't a question. It was a threat, wrapped in the quiet certainty of a man who was used to his preferences becoming reality. Mr. Lowell paled slightly. The hospital's largest private donor wing was named after the Kim Family Foundation. No problem at all. We'll make the necessary arrangements. Nurse Jones, you're reassigned to Mr. Kim for the duration of his stay. 12-hour shifts. Is that acceptable? All eyes turned to Amara. She felt trapped. This was a violation of a dozen protocols, a nightmare of favoritism and potential liability. But saying no to the administrator in front of this patient was professional suicide. And a small, traitorous part of her was intrigued by the man in the bed, by the weight of what he just revealed about his work. She nodded stiffly. Yes, that's acceptable. The men left, a new order established. Amara was now officially the personal nurse of Min Jun Kim. The first thing she did was turn to him, her professional composure cracking. You can't do that. I just did. You undermine the head of cardiology and strong-armed an administrator. That creates resentment. It makes my job harder. Your job is to keep me alive, he said. I have just ensured you have the authority and consistency to do so. The politics are my concern, not yours. He studied her frustrated expression. You would rather have been taken off the case. The question was too perceptive. She should have wanted off. It would have been easier, safer, but she didn't. I would rather have my expertise trusted without you having to issue a decree, she said finally. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Noted. Over the next 48 hours, a new routine formed within the sterile bubble of the suite. Kang Jae-hyun came and went like a tense shadow, delivering updates that Min Jun would listen to with closed eyes, then dismiss with terse instructions. The board meeting was postponed. The Vorst offer was neither accepted nor rejected. It was left to hover, a sword of Damocles. His real focus seemed to be inside the room. He asked Amara questions, not just about his care, but about her, where she trained, why she became a nurse. He listened to her answers with the same intensity he gave his business reports. In return, almost without meaning to, she began to ask her own, about the neural interfaces, how they worked, who they helped. On the second afternoon, he had Kang bring a tablet. With Amara's cautious permission, he showed her a video. A woman in her 60s, post-stroke, face slack. Then with a small device attached to her temple, she concentrated. A digital voice, synthesized but clear, spoke, "I love you, John." The woman's eyes filled with tears. Amara's did too. She turned away, pretending to adjust a monitor. "That's what they want to turn into a line item," Min Jun said quietly, putting the tablet down. "A non-core asset. My grandfather never got his voice back. It was supposed to be for him." The confession hung in the air. Amara, her back to him, spoke softly. "My father died of congestive heart failure. The system was slow, understaffed. By the time he got the care he needed, it was too late. That's why I'm here, in the trenches, trying to be the person who doesn't show up too late." It was the most personal thing she'd ever said to a patient. A profound understanding passed between them, silent and deep. They were both in the business of fighting loss, from opposite ends of the spectrum. But the outside world wouldn't stay away. Kang Jae-hyun's investigations into the nurse situation were discreet but thorough. She discovered Amara's financial pressures, the sister's tuition, the overtime logs. She saw not a saint, but a vulnerable employee, a potential vector of influence. She approached Amara during a shift change in the hallway. "Nurse Jones, a word." Amara followed her to a quiet alcove. Kang didn't waste time. "Your dedication is noted, but you must understand the position you're in. Min Jun SSI is in a vulnerable state. He is attaching a significant narrative to your actions. Gratitude is one thing, dependency is another." "I'm his nurse, not his therapist," Amara said coolly. "Exactly, keep it that way. His recovery must be the priority, not," Kang gestured vaguely, "conversations, not personal revelations. The board is already uneasy about his focus. Your presence is becoming a topic." Amara felt a chill. "Are you asking me to limit my patient's communication? That's unethical." "I'm asking you to be professional. The kind of professional who understands that a man like Min Jun Kim exists in a world with consequences you cannot imagine. Your kindness could be misconstrued. By him, by others." Kang's meaning was clear. You could be seen as taking advantage. Or worse, you could become a target. "My kindness," Amara repeated, her voice tight, "is part of my job. If he finds comfort in talking, that aids his recovery. Now, if you'll excuse me, my patient's medication is due." She walked away, heart pounding. Kang's warning was a virus planting seeds of doubt. Was she being professional, or was she, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, getting drawn into a fantasy? The man in the suite was a billionaire CEO. She was a nurse with debt. The fairy tale narrative was a trap. She returned to the suite to find Min Jun awake, staring out the window at the city skyline. He spoke without turning. "She talked to you." "Who?" "Jae-hyun, she warned you off." He finally looked at her. His face was pale but sharp, his intelligence a visible force. "She thinks she's protecting the company. She's wrong." "Maybe she's protecting you," Amara offered, preparing his evening meds. "From what? From a human connection after a brush with death? From remembering what any of this is actually for?" He shook his head. The silence in that boardroom, It's the same silence my grandfather lived in. It's the silence Vorst Group wants to impose, the silence of a spreadsheet where a life-changing technology is just a number. You broke that silence for me in every way possible. Amara stopped, the pill cup in her hand. Mr. Kim, Min Jun, I did my job. You're constructing a metaphor out of a medical intervention. Aren't all the best truths constructed? He asked. You gave me my life back. Now, inadvertently, you're making me question what I'm supposed to do with it. That is more terrifying to the people around me than any heart attack. The revelation landed with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't about personal attachment. This was about existential disruption. She wasn't just a nurse. She had become a catalyst for a crisis of purpose in one of the most powerful men in the city. The stakes had just multiplied exponentially. The next morning, the dam broke. A financial blog, known for its insider leaks, published a blind item, which recently hospitalized tech titan is so captivated by his caretaker that he's reshuffling priorities and spooking his board. Sources say the hero nurse is now a permanent fixture in the VIP suite, raising questions about judgment during a sensitive takeover play. It was coy, but the clues were obvious. By noon, the story had legs. Local news outlets picked it up, their helicopters subtly circling near the hospital. Billionaire patient and nurse, a modern fairy tale or corporate distraction. Kang Jae-hyun stormed into the suite, her phone in her hand. It's out. The Vorst Group has issued a statement expressing concern for Mr. Kim's health and judgment and suggesting the board appoint an independent chairman to oversee negotiations. They're using this asterisk, she spat the word, glaring at Amara, who was checking vitals, to make him look incompetent, unstable. Min Jun's face was a mask of cold fury. Find the leak. The leak is the symptom. The problem is the perception. You have a critical board call in 1 hour. You need to be seen as strong, focused, and in command. Not, she didn't finish, but her eyes flicked to Amara again. Amara felt the walls of the room closing in. The private bubble had burst. She was now a tabloid headline, a weapon in a corporate war. Her face burned with a mixture of shame and anger. She was a professional being painted as a gold-digging cliché or a pathetic pawn. Min Jun saw her expression, his anger refocused, becoming protective. Amara has nothing to do with this. The world thinks she does, Kang shot back. And as long as she is here in this room, on your personal payroll, that narrative will grow. It will drown out everything else. It will cost you the company. A heavy silence fell. The heart monitor beeped, a steady reminder of the fragile physical truth beneath the media storm. Min Jun looked from Kang's desperate, strategic face to Amara's stricken one. The two halves of his life were at war, and Amara was the battlefield. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the decision was made, etched in grim resolve. Set up the board call, here, in this room. Kang stared. What? You can't be. I can and I will, at the top of the hour. He turned his gaze to Amara, his voice softened, but the command was absolute. Nurse Jones, you will stay for the duration of the call. Amara's breath caught. That is highly inappropriate. I should leave. You will stay, he repeated, each word a deliberate hammer strike. You will stand right there by the window in your scrubs with your stethoscope. He held her eyes, and in his she saw the full, terrifying scale of his plan. He wasn't hiding her. He was putting her on display. He was going to face his board and the specter of the voracious Vorst Group, with the woman who saved his life literally in the frame. It was either a stroke of genius or an act of catastrophic self-sabotage. And in 1 hour, they would all find out which. The hour passed in a blur of silent preparation. Kang Jae-hyun set up a secure video link on a large monitor, her movements sharp with disapproval. Amara stood by the window as instructed, a statue in light blue scrubs. She felt like a prop in a play she hadn't auditioned for. Min Jun, propped up in bed, had Kang adjust the camera angle with a director's precision. I want the room in frame, all of it. When the call connected, Amara saw the split screen. 6 board members in a sleek conference room and 3 representatives from the Vorst Group, their expressions a blend of concern and cold calculation. The chairman, an older man named Mr. Park, began with forced warmth. Minjun SSI, we are relieved to see you recovering. Our prayers are with you. Thank you, Minjun said, his voice stronger now, smoothed by a calculated dose of medication and sheer will. Let's dispense with the prayers and address the offer. I've seen Vorst's revised terms. A Vorst executive, a woman with ice-blonde hair named Clara Vogt, leaned forward. We believe the new valuation reflects the full potential of Nexacore's assets. It's a generous offer, allowing for a smooth transition and a dignified exit for you, given your health considerations. The condescension was velvet-gloved. Minjun didn't flinch. My health considerations are being managed by an excellent care team. As you can see, he deliberately shifted his gaze from the camera to Amara, standing by the window. Every face on the screen followed his look. Eyes narrowed, brows furrowed. Clara Vogt's smile tightened. We see you are in capable hands, Mr. Park said quickly, trying to steer the conversation back. Now, about the vote on the offer. Before we vote, Minjun interrupted, I want to clarify something. The narrative, as the blogs are calling it. He paused, letting the silence build. This is Nurse Amara Jones. 48 hours ago, I was in cardiac arrest. She was the first responder. She performed compressions for 47 seconds before the crash team arrived. Her actions are the sole reason I am alive to take this call. He let that hang, a stark medical fact in the corporate ether. The question Vorst and this board are asking is whether my judgment is compromised. I submit that my judgment has never been clearer. I was building a company to give voice to the voiceless, and when I was the one rendered voiceless and powerless, it was a nurse, a professional doing her job with exceptional skill, who gave me back my life. If that experience refocuses my priorities, it doesn't make me unstable, it makes me coherent. The boardroom was dead silent. Clara Vogt recovered first. A touching story, Mr. Kim, but sentiment doesn't drive shareholder value. The volatility your personal refocusing has introduced is measurable. The stock dipped 3% on the gossip alone. Then measure this, Minjun said, his tone turning to flint. I am terminating negotiations with the Vorst Group, effective immediately, and I will be proposing a new strategic direction to the board next week, a non-profit partnership model for our neural interface division, ensuring the technology reaches the patients who need it most, not just those who can afford it. Pandemonium. On screen, people began talking over each other. Mr. Park was waving his hands for order. Clara Vogt's face was a mask of cold fury. Amara, watching from the sidelines, felt her own heart hammering. He wasn't just defending her, he was using her as the moral cornerstone to blow up the entire deal. She was no longer just a catalyst, she was the justification for a billion-dollar pivot. Kang Jae-hyun, off-camera, put her face in her hands. When the call ended abruptly, the room throbbed with a new kind of tension. Minjun sagged back against the pillows, the performance having drained him, but his eyes were bright with triumph. He looked at Amara. Now they know. They know you've gone rogue, Kang snapped, turning off the monitor with a violent punch of a button. They'll call an emergency shareholder meeting. They'll vote you out as CEO. Let them try, he whispered, his eyes closing. The story is out of their control now. He was right, but not in the way he hoped. The story exploded. This time, it wasn't a blind item. It was a leaked transcript of the call, detailing Minjun's speech about the hero nurse and his drastic new plans. The media narrative split into two warring camps: the romantic redeemer story, the billionaire saved by love and changing his life, and the corporate meltdown story, the unstable CEO hijacked by a savior complex and a pretty face. Amara was photographed leaving the hospital that evening, her tired face pixelated but recognizable. The headline, "The Nurse Who Stopped a Heart and a Takeover." Her world shattered. Her phone blew up with calls from numbers she didn't know. Reporters camped outside her apartment building. The hospital administration, panicking under the glare of publicity, placed her on paid administrative leave, citing the untenable blurring of professional boundaries. It was a suspension in everything but name. Her sister, crying, called from campus. A reporter had approached her after class, asking about Amara's relationship with Minjun Kim. Amara felt hunted, and in the middle of the storm, a new player arrived. A courier delivered a plain envelope to her apartment door. Inside was a business card, Clara Vogt, Strategic Acquisitions, Vorst Group, a handwritten note on the back, a word of advice from one professional woman to another. There is always a price. Let's discuss yours. Discreetly, a meeting time and location at a private downtown club was listed. Amara stared at the card. This was the wait it gets worse moment. The Vorst group wasn't just fighting Min Jun in the boardroom. They were coming for her. They saw her not as a person but as the leverage point to break him. She crumpled the card, her mind reeling. Then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It's Kang. We need to talk. Not at the hospital. The cafe on 3rd and Laurel. 1 hour. Come alone. Amara went. She had nowhere else to turn. Kang Jae-hyun was already there, looking more exhausted than Amara had ever seen her. She pushed a cup of tea across the table. I am sorry, Kang said, the words seeming to cost her, for my part in this. I was managing an asset. I forgot he was a man, and I did not see you as a person, only a variable. Why are you telling me this now? Amara asked, suspicious. Because the variable has become the detonator, Kang said bluntly, and I have information you need. The leak of the board call transcript. It did not come from Vorst. It came from inside, from the board. Amara's blood ran cold. They're leaking their own CEO's private medical conference call. Create public pressure to make him look reckless to justify removing him. They want the Vorst deal. It makes them rich quickly. His new philanthropic vision makes them rich slowly, if at all. They are using you and the media frenzy around you as the excuse. Kang leaned forward. But that is not the worst part. Vorst Group, they have a history. They don't just buy companies, they dismantle them. And their due diligence is aggressive. They have been investigating you, Amara, deeply. Kang slid a folder across the table. With trembling hands, Amara opened it. Inside were documents, copies of her father's old, disputed medical bills, records of her sister's tuition payments from her account, a grainy photo of her leaving a payday loan office 2 years ago, and a draft contract prepared by a Vorst subsidiary for a consulting position with a staggering retainer fee 10 times her annual nursing salary. The terms were vague, the duration short. It was a blatant, luxurious bribe. They are going to offer you this, Kang said quietly. If you take it, they will use it to prove you are a mercenary, that Min Jun was manipulated by a greedy woman. If you refuse, they will use your financial history to paint you as desperate and therefore easily manipulated. Either way, they destroy your credibility and by extension, his moral high ground. They box him in with your biography. Amara felt the walls of the cafe closing in. It was a checkmate move. Her past, her struggles, the very things that made her who she was, were being weaponized. Why are you showing me this? She whispered. Because I believe in the company he built, not the one the board wants to sell. And because, Kang hesitated, a rare show of uncertainty, he sees something in you, an integrity he's missing in that boardroom, and he is not a man who sees falsely. I am switching sides, but you need to understand the battlefield. It is you. Amara left the cafe in a daze. The Vorst offer came that evening, as predicted, via a polished lawyer in a 3-piece suit who met her at a neutral location. He laid out the contract, the numbers glittering. All she had to do was sign and publicly state that her care for Min Jun Kim was strictly professional and that she respected the board's difficult position. The subtext was clear. Throw cold water on the romantic redeemer story, strip Min Jun of his emotional justification. She refused. The lawyer smiled, a thin, predatory smile. A noble choice, pity. The alternative narrative is already prepared. We release it in the morning. He left her with the ghost of that threat hanging in the air. That night, Amara didn't sleep. She sat in her dark apartment, the city lights blurring outside her window. She thought of her father. She thought of Min Jun's grandfather, 2 men silenced in different ways. She had fought so hard to exist in a system that felt designed to grind people down. And now, her very existence was being used to grind down a man who was, for all his power, trying to fight the same kind of silence. Just before dawn, her phone lit up. It was a text from Min Jun's private number. He was no longer in the hospital. Against medical advice, he had discharged himself. The text was simple. I'm at the Nexa Core Lab. I need to show you what you're fighting for, or what they want to destroy, please. It was a line in the sand. Going to him now after everything would be the final piece of evidence for his enemies. It would confirm every salacious headline, every boardroom fear. It would make her a permanent part of the corporate meltdown story. But staying away felt like a betrayal of something deeper, a betrayal of the truth she had witnessed in that hospital room, of the man who saw her not as a variable, but as a compass. She made her decision. As the first light of morning broke over the city, Amara Jones got on a bus, heading not towards the safety of obscurity, but directly into the heart of the storm. She was walking into the lion's den, to the very source of the power struggle, to see the machines that gave people voices. The battle for Nexacor was no longer about stocks and shares. It was about a story, and she was about to choose which one she would help tell. The Nexacor lab was nothing like the hospital. It was a cathedral of quiet purpose, all soft lighting, clean lines, and the low hum of dedicated machines. Minjun was waiting for her in a spacious observation room overlooking the main lab floor. He was in a simple black sweater and trousers, a world away from the hospital gown, but he looked pale, leaning slightly on a cane. Kang Jaihyun stood a few steps behind him, her posture rigid. "You shouldn't be out of the hospital," were Amara's first words, her nurse's instinct overriding the surrealness of the moment. "Neither should you be in the crosshairs of a multinational corporation," he replied. "Yet here we are." He gestured to the window. Below, technicians in white coats were working with patients. An older man with a tremor was using a prototype glove that stabilized his hand enough to write his name. A young woman was using an eye-tracking interface to compose a message on a screen. The silence in the room was active, hopeful. "This is the silence we fight," Minjun said softly, "not the silence of the boardroom. The silence of isolation. This is what they want to shelve." Amara watched, her anger and fear melting into awe. "It's beautiful." "It's necessary," he corrected. "And it's why I brought you here. I owe you a debt that can't be repaid, but I also need your help, not as a nurse, as a witness." He turned to face her fully. "The emergency shareholder meeting is in 3 hours. They will vote to remove me and accept the Vorst offer. I have one chance to stop it, to speak directly to the shareholders, to show them what's at stake. But my credibility is contaminated by the media narrative, by you." He said it not as an accusation, but as a painful fact. Amara nodded, her throat tight. "I know, Vorst showed me the trap. Anything I do or say just feeds the story." "Exactly," Kang Jaihyun interjected, stepping forward. "Which is why we must change the story, not deny it, reframe it." She picked up a tablet and handed it to Amara. On it was a draft of a press release. The headline, NEXACOE CEO announces Voice Project NONPOFIT SEDS funding with personal equity. The subheading, Initiative inspired by caregivers' expertise, aims to bridge medical tech and frontline patient care. Amara scanned it. The release positioned her not as a romantic interest, but as a clinical consultant. It quoted her fabricated insights on patient communication barriers. It announced Minjun was liquidating a significant portion of his personal stock to fund a standalone nonprofit, removing the altruistic division from the company's saleable assets. It was a masterstroke, using the public's fascination with her to legitimize his pivot, not undermine it. "You want me to lie," Amara said flatly. "I want you to tell a deeper truth," Minjun countered. "You do understand patient barriers. You lived them with your father. You fight them every shift. Your insight is valuable. I'm making you the co-architect of this, publicly, not as a favor, but because your perspective is what the tech world lacks. The Vorst narrative says you are a distraction. My narrative says you are the missing link." The audacity of it took her breath away. He was offering her a seat at the table in the most public way possible. It would burn her career at the hospital to the ground. She would become a permanent part of his world. "And if I say no, then I walk into that shareholder meeting with a moral argument they've already decided is a personal folly. I will likely lose. Vorst will dismantle this." He nodded to the lab below. "And you will return to a nursing career under a cloud of scandal that will take years to clear. Saying no changes nothing for you except the scale of the ruin." It was brutally honest. He wasn't pressuring her with sentiment. He was presenting a shared tactical reality. They were pinned down, and this was the only exit he could engineer. "What about the Vorst dossier, my financial history?" Kang answered, "We release it first. We frame it. We say the personal challenges you've overcome are precisely why you understand the importance of accessible care. We turn their weapon into your credential. It's risky, but it's the only move left." Amara looked from Kang's determined face to Minjun's waiting one. She looked down at the lab, at the woman typing with her eyes. She thought of her father's helpless silence. She had gone into nursing to be a shield against that kind of silence. This was a chance to be a sword. "I need to make a condition," she said, her voice finding a new steadiness. "Name it." The Voice Project. It has a dedicated fund for nursing education and retention, not just a line item, a real commitment, scholarships, mental health support, because the person at the bedside matters as much as the machine. She was thinking of the double shifts, the burnout, the feeling of being too late. A slow, real smile spread across Minjun's face, the first true one she'd ever seen. "That," he said, "is why I asked." He turned to Kang. "Add it, make it the first initiative." 3 hours later, the world watched. Minjun Kim did not appear at the shareholder meeting in a boardroom. He appeared via live stream from the Nexacore lab, with Amara Jones standing beside him, not in scrubs but in simple, professional attire. He looked tired but fiercely present. He didn't talk about stock valuations. He introduced Amara as Nurse Jones, detailed her actions the night of his arrest, and then pivoted. She didn't just save a CEO. She highlighted a critical gap between innovation and implementation. "That is why I am announcing the Voice Project and why I have asked her to help lead its patient advocacy wing." He announced the liquidation of his personal stock, the firewall it created around the core technology. Then, he handed the stream to Amara. For a terrifying second, she faced the camera. She saw her own face reflected in dozens of financial news screens. She took a breath and spoke not from a script, but from her heart. "In the hospital, we have a saying, see the person, not the patient. Technology should do the same. It should see the person, not the profit. What is built here gives people back their voices. My role is to ensure those voices are heard, from the first prototype to the last mile of care." That is the partnership we are announcing today, not a story, a solution. It was calm, professional, and utterly convincing. It reframed everything. The romantic Redeemer headline evaporated, replaced by KIM partners with Hero Nurse on groundbreaking NONPRFIT. The shareholder vote was chaos, but with the core assets suddenly off the table and the public sentiment swinging dramatically, the Vorst offer lost its appeal. The motion to remove Minjun failed by a narrow margin. He remained CEO, but of a changed company. In the aftermath, the silence returned, but it was a productive one. Amara officially resigned from the hospital. The Voice Project launched with massive media coverage, its nursing initiative becoming a model. She and Minjun worked together daily, a partnership built on profound mutual respect and a shared mission. The tabloids eventually lost interest, finding no salacious fodder in press conferences about grant funding and clinical trials. 6 months later, on a quiet evening at the lab, Minjun found Amara reviewing feedback from a focus group of stroke survivors. "You're here late," he said. "So are you," she replied, not looking up. "Your cardiologist would disapprove." "My cardiologist is on the Voice Project's advisory board. Thanks to you, she's complicit." He paused. "I never properly thanked you for that day in the shareholder meeting. You were formidable." She finally looked up, smiling. "I was terrified." "I know, that's what made it formidable." He hesitated, a rare unscripted moment. "The board has approved the expansion to 3 new countries." "That's wonderful." "It is. It requires a lot of travel. I was thinking the project's co-lead should probably see the operations on the ground, if she wants to." Amara studied him. This was not the man from the hospital, powerful and powerless. This was a man building something new, offering a shared path forward, with no assumptions, only an invitation. The curiosity gap that had opened between them in the sterile hospital room had found its resolution not in a fairy tale, but in a shared purpose. "I'll consider it," she said, echoing his words from long ago, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Good," he said, and in the quiet hum of the lab, surrounded by the machines that fought silence, that was enough. So what do we make of this collision between 2 worlds? On its surface, it's an extraordinary tale, a chance medical encounter that spiraled into a corporate showdown and an unlikely partnership. But at its core, it's a story about the walls we build between different kinds of power and how easily they can crumble in the face of a fundamental human truth. In that hospital room, the billionaire and the nurse were stripped down to their most basic identities, one of mortal vulnerability, the other of profound capability. For a moment, the world outside, with all its hierarchies, its spreadsheets, its gossip blogs, ceased to exist. The only currency that mattered was a heartbeat. That moment didn't last. The world rushed back in, with all its noise and agendas, trying desperately to force the experience into a familiar box. A scandal, a romance, a distraction. But what Minjun and Amara understood, and what their adversaries failed to grasp, was that the connection forged in crisis wasn't a weakness to be exploited. It was a lens. It refocused Minjun's vision for his life's work, reminding him that the technology was always meant to serve people, not just generate profit. For Amara, it transformed her from a caregiver within a system into an architect, changing that system from the outside. Their story asks a lingering question that applies far beyond a hospital suite or a corporate boardroom. What potential is lost when we dismiss the connections that form across the arbitrary chasms of status and profession? The most transformative ideas often emerge at the intersection of different perspectives, in the space where the insider and the outsider meet. The Voice Project wasn't conceived in a boardroom brainstorming session. It was born in the quiet aftermath of a code blue, in the shared understanding between a man who built machines for voices and the woman who used her own to calm his storm. Today, Minjun Kim continues to lead Nexacore, but the company's culture is indelibly changed, with a non-profit arm that ensures its most meaningful work reaches those who need it most. Amara Jones no longer works shifts, but she visits hospitals regularly, not as staff, but as an advocate, ensuring the nurses on the front lines have a say in the technology that arrives at the bedside. They are, by all accounts, a formidable professional team. Where their personal story goes from here is theirs alone. The public fairy tale demanded a neat ending. The reality they built is something more interesting, a lasting collaboration with roots in a moment of raw, unscripted humanity. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin not with a shout, but with a whisper, not with a strategic plan, but with a single act of care that echoes outward, reshaping lives and redrawing maps in ways no one could have predicted. It reminds us that our trajectories are not fixed, that a moment of true connection can become a compass, pointing us toward a version of ourselves and a version of the world we hadn't dared to imagine before. If this story reminded you of the unexpected turns in your own life, or of the quiet power of showing up for another human being, let us know in the comments. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that ordinary moments can contain extraordinary possibilities. For more stories that explore the hidden connections shaping our world, subscribe and join our community. Thanks for watching.